Welcome to this week's episode of Insight. During this week's show, we're going to be spending the entire time reviewing a recent nationwide poll that was conducted by the International Republican Institute, which is technically an organization that is funded by the US government, and this poll was actually paid by them. So we're going to be going over the details of what this polling had and what it says about what people's attitudes are in the country. The most important question that's always asked in a poll, it's always the first question, is what they call the right track, wrong track, in which people are asked if the country is heading in the right direction or if it's heading in the wrong direction. And what we have right now is, in the current poll, 34% of people are saying that the country is heading in the right direction, and 46% are saying that the country is heading in the wrong direction. These numbers were reversed last July, which was right after the previous elections. The number 41% were saying the country is going in the right direction, and 34% is going in the wrong direction. So we're seeing a deterioration of people's attitudes towards the country and the political system, of what they think is happening in the country. Now, this right track, wrong track question is always directly tied to the current leadership, because it is sort of the standard that people pass, because in any situation where there's more right track than wrong track, if there's another election, the current government has a good chance of winning, and if the opposite is the case, they have a good chance of losing. What we need to do in any poll is to look through the crosstabs. And what are crosstabs? And those are not simply the first set of questions. Those are you want to know, for example, what do under 50 men in a certain province in Lori or Sunni think? So you sort of get a very distinct breakdown. And when you look at the crosstabs on this first question, the more urban, the younger, and the more affluent the voters are, the more pessimistic they are about the country. The more older, the more rural, and the poorer the people are, the more optimistic they are about the country, which is actually dovetails very directly with the Prime Minister's support and his base. The second question that we're going to look at, and which was asked, was about asking people to name the first two most important issues facing the country. And three top issues were the territorial border issues, which were number one, which 28% said was their first issue, and 6% said that was their second most important issue. The second one was the economy, in which 4% of people said was the most important issue, and 13% of people said was the second most important issue. And the third one was national security in general, which is very much tied to the first question, in which 15% said that was the most important issue, and 2% said that was the second most important issue. So once you combine this, overall, almost 43% of the voters clearly identified the territorial integrity of the country and national security as the top issue facing the country, and this far overwhelms all other issues that the survey asked about. Now let's move on to the third issue, that question that was covered, which was what I call the influence question, in which people were asked, do they think they can influence politics or essentially the affairs of the country? And this was quite intriguing, in which 66% of people said that they can actually have, that they have the ability to affect political life or the direction of the country, which is a remarkably high number, and frankly much higher than other well-established democracies. And this is one of the really good things that came out of this poll. And what this tells us is that people feel empowered and they have agency, and they feel or they believe and they act on the fact that they actually have a say in what happens in the country politically, and that they have a chance to change things if they like. Now we're going to move to the other question, the next question that was asked, and this was about public attitude towards public institutions. And we're going to go over the three most trusted or popular institutions in the country now, and the three least popular. The most credible institution in the country is the Human Rights Defender's Office, which I would say is actually quite well deserved because of the person that we had there before and the wonderful job that he did. And they have a 68 to 25% approval rating, which means 68% of people approve, 25% don't. The second one, and this is actually a surprising and remarkable number, is the police, which comes in at 68% approval rating and 29% disapproval. And I think this is really driven by the reforms that we've had, in which we had these guys being replaced by police officers that look like this. Because of reforms that we've had in our Justice Department, we have police force that is better educated, better paid, better trained, and they have systematically started moving out the old stereotypical police officers that were the butt of 1,000 jokes in Armenia. The third most popular institution, which I think again is another positive, is local government, in which 63% of people trust local government or approve of it, and 33% don't. Now, why is this important? Local government is where unlike state policy on a high level, things happen that really affect your life. So what you're seeing is that people are, despite their negative view of national politicians, they see that their local government is responsive to them and working, which I think for democracy building is very, very important because that's the most basic level of democratic governance. The three least popular institutions in Armenia, and all three of them have well-deserved this reputation, is the Constitutional Court, the Supreme Judicial Council, and the most unpopular institution in Armenia, which is again quite well reserved, is the National Assembly. These are institutions that have approval ratings in the 20s and 30s, with disapproval ratings in the 60s all across the board. The next question that was asked, which we're going to cover, was the Prime Minister's own approval rating. And right now he has 49% of the country that approve of the work that he's doing, and 48% of the country that disapprove of the work that he's doing. There has been a consistent drop from the day he came to office, and these numbers have consistently dropped. He used to have much greater positives, and now he's essentially running even. Just as many people approve of him and disapprove of him, which means directionally he's constantly getting less and less popular as time goes by. When you look at the crosstabs, what you see is very much in the right track, wrong track question is the Prime Minister's base is older, rural, and poor. Which is essentially the base of all populist politicians. And the people who are most vehemently against him are urban, and the more urban, i.e. Yerevan, the greater the opposition to him, younger and more affluent voters. You're seeing these very distinct class differences. One of the most striking numbers is that the people who are very opposed to him, which is because they grade the level of support or opposition, is 33%. Essentially 33% of the country hates the Prime Minister vehemently. That number is 42% in Yerevan itself when you look at the crosstabs, and I'll get back to you why when we finish the show about why this is so important in the long run. However, we should not be fooled about what this could mean if there's elections anytime soon, is because in a parliamentary system, you don't need to have 50+1 support to actually win an election. The way parliamentary systems work, if someone is in the low to mid 30s, they can probably put together a governing coalition or win enough seats to become the primary party. In a presidential system, which we used to have, this would have been far more devastating. But in a current parliamentary system, we could very well have an election tomorrow, and despite the fact that he's less popular, he could still end up with a working majority. Let's move on to public attitudes towards foreign countries. And in order of rank of which are the friendliest countries to Armenia, this was the grading system. This is how countries were graded. First came in France. Number 2 was Iran, number 3 was China, number 4 was the United States, number 5 was Russia, and then it was the European Union in general. However, when it came to which country can Armenia trust or is Armenia a security partner, Russia essentially leaped from popularity to fourth to first place, in which 64% of people say Russia is the #1 partner for Armenia for security purposes. Let's move on to the next question, which was about military reforms and national security, and how that fits into the negotiations process with the Aliyev regime and other countries. And when you look at it, 56% of voters said that Armenia must strengthen its military capabilities while trying to reach peace. That number becomes 28% when it's people were trying to reach peace while getting ready to defend ourselves against a possible war. That number becomes 13%, which is Armenia must strengthen its military capabilities without seeking aspirations. This is essentially the no peace camp that we should be at a constant state of war or be ready for it without ever thinking about peace. There was a very tiny number of people who think that we should be not strengthening our capabilities while trying to reach peace, which is at 2%, this is at the peace at any cost group, if you want to categorize them. What is clear from these numbers is that there's clear consensus in this country for what I call a policy of peace through strength, in which people are not interested in war, they're interested in peace, while at the same time they think peace can only come through strengthening the military, rebuilding our military institutions, and making the country much stronger on that front. It's very clear that the country is demanding political military reform in strengthening the capabilities of the military. And one of the most telling and damning things for our current military leadership is that 53% of people think that the country is incapable of defending its borders without help from another country. And that is as big of an indictment as you can get for our current military leadership. Let's move on to the next question, which was in regards to the negotiations with Turkey about establishing diplomatic relations and possibly opening the border in the long run. Negotiations with Turkey are supported by clear majorities of voters. 60-70% of people, depending on how the question is asked, support negotiations with Turkey. Some of them say that there should be preconditions on Artsakh, on genocide recognition, but overall, there's a clear track record of 2/3 of people that support this engagement. While at the same time, there's a very vehement 1/3 that is against any kind of outreach, and they don't see anything good coming out of these negotiations. What is interesting, though, is despite the fact that majorities support this conversations or this dialogue with the Erdogan regime, almost everyone thinks, there's a clear majorities who think that the outcome of any of these negotiations or the border openings are going to be more negative for the country than positive. So in the same way that there's hardly any constituencies in Turkey that will really be supportive of establishing normalized relations with Armenia and opening the borders, for the most part, that is also the case in Armenia. People really don't see this as a critical issue, and they don't see this as something that's going to be transformative. And if they think it's transformative, they usually look at it from a negative ledger. Now let's move on to a related issue, which is obviously the Artsakh issue. And people were asked, what do you think, what's the ideal solution for the Artsakh question? 35% of Armenian voters said that Artsakh should be recognized as an independent state on its own. 34% of voters said it should become recognized as a part of Armenia. 16% said that it should be set up as an autonomous region within Armenia, but separate. And 11% of voters said that Artsakh should become part of Russia. Now, what is remarkable here is we have gone through 30 years, countless wars, and a body politic that is entirely divided on so many things, but there's almost complete unanimity on this issue. It's almost like nothing has changed in 1988. What unites the Armenian body politic is one thing, is that under no circumstances should the regime in Baku have any say over the lives of Armenians of Artsakh. That is across the board, and it has never changed. So in conclusion, when we're looking at this poll and trying to sort of decipher holistically what is relevant in it, and these are the important points. One is there's a clear pattern that the Prime Minister is getting weaker over time, and there's really no reason to believe that this direction is going to reverse itself. The issue is to what speed and at what extent is his hardcore base that he's never going to lose. The second thing is, which is very clear from this polling, is that democracy in Armenia is being institutionalized. It's not necessarily tied to individuals. And you see this in the attitudes that people have towards what impact they think they can have and on local government. And another one, which we didn't discuss, was people in the 65th to 70th percentile free that they think that they have complete freedom of speech and they can express themselves without any reservations or fear. So we're having an institutionalization of democracy, and this is not simply within law, it's really within the attitudes of people, because a free people embrace that, their rights, not as an abstract in legal context, but in how they live their ordinary lives. So we're seeing the institutionalization of democracy, which is actually a very good development. Moving on to the Artsakh question, as I said, it's remarkable the consensus that's there, and that what people believe, and it unites essentially the entirety of the Armenian nation. When we move towards military reform and peace, it's about peace through strength. Frankly, if the prime minister wants to stay in power for an extended period of time, he has to be primarily focused on strengthening the country and strengthening the military and reforming it. Because if he does not do so, someone's going to run against him in the next election with that agenda and beat him. Because again, there's very strong consensus in the society in regards to that. What this leads to, just in crass, raw political terms, this makes the next mayoral elections in Yerevan, which are going to happen in 2023, the most important elections in Armenia in the post-revolutionary period. Given the prime minister's lack of popularity and the vehemence against him, especially in Yerevan, and considering that these elections are going to be a year and a half from now, where he's bound to get weaker, his party is likely to lose the mayoral elections in Yerevan. And given the nature of the country and its size, whoever wins that election is going to almost become the automatic leader of the opposition to run against the prime minister when there's a next election, if the elections don't come earlier than that. Now, whether that person is Hayk Marutyan, the former mayor running against, or someone like Mani Tandelian, we don't know. But it's very clear that there's a very clear track to create a real opposition in the country that isn't tied to the current discredited opposition figures in the parliament. And it is almost the sort of the beginning of the post-revolutionary political period in which you have real credible forces taking each other on. Thank you for joining me in this week's episode of Insights.
The thrill is gone. The thrill is gone away. The thrill is gone. The thrill is gone.